Hey, in today's PAC-T test, we're going to be testing guns of the Old West, guns of the Cowboys, and we're going to do a standard full PAC-T test. But hold on, something's not quite right. I'll be right back. That's more like it. Well, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be testing the 44 Colt 230 grain bullet in our standard PAC-T test. That is 5 shots off the bench from a distance of 15 yards at a bullseye target. And then what I'm really interested in is to see how lethal a round like this is compared to some of our current self-defense ammunition. So we're going to be popping 1 round of 44 Colt 230 grain into clear ballistic gelatin 20% NATO block from a distance of 7 yards. And the pistol, the revolver that I'm going to be using is this. This is a Uberti replica of the 1871 Colt Navy conversion. I think it's a beautiful gun, just a real nice gun, kind of fun to shoot. And of course, this is chambered in 44 Colt. Now the 44 Colt came out, originally started design, as I understand it, about 1860, came out and was adopted by the U.S. Army about 1871, and was only in adoption, only in use for just a couple of years, and then it was replaced by the much more powerful 45 Colt. But this is what we got today. We're going to have some fun with this thing, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, if you're not familiar with these guns, they're quite a bit different than a modern-day revolver. It's obviously a single action only, and it is loaded through this port right here. And to allow us to turn the cylinder, we need to pull it back onto a half cock just a little bit. And now, of course, we can turn that cylinder, exposing different empty chambers. Popped 1 in, drop in the second, now what I'm going to do is, you'll notice right here that we're on an empty cylinder right now. I'm going to close this up. We're on an empty cylinder on half cock. And by the way, the sighting is from here on the barrel, obviously then to the front sight, also on the barrel. All right, folks, when we cock this hammer fully, it's going to rotate this cylinder into position. We're ready to fire our 5 rounds. This has got a nice, very light trigger. And 1 more. There we go. Now, unloading this revolver is maybe a little bit different than if you're familiar with revolvers, and certainly different than if you're accustomed to pistols. On the side here, right over here, if you see this, right over here, it almost acts like a bolt, sort of, if you think of it like that. And what we're going to do, we're going to actuate that. We're going to move that. And it's going to press inside here. Not quite cleared yet. Let me put it on half cock. When we actuate that, when we move that, it's going to push a little ramrod here through the cylinder, as you can see. See that? And that's how we do it. And then we move to the next round, pull that one out, and I keep these for reloading. It is hard to get this today. However, in this same pistol, I could shoot 44 Special. I have some of those, but I wanted to use the more authentic 44 Colt today. Well, this 230 grain bullet penetrated completely through the first block and into the second block. I'm looking at, I'll call this a field estimate, 21 inches of total penetration. Looks like I may have a little bit of fragmentation along this path, but that could be the soft barrier that was carried across. This is not a hollow point bullet, so it did okay. It actually did surprisingly well.
When a man with a 45 meets a man with a rifle, the man with a pistol will be a dead man.
Let's see about that. Well, Ramon was right. The rifle is so much more powerful than the revolver, but that's no surprise to me, kind of what I expected to see. I'm shooting the Winchester 3030. This is a 150 grain power point bullet, and there it is. It traveled completely through the first gel block, and you saw this gel block here, 20% NATO gel block. It weighs about 16 pounds. Flip completely, almost off the table. Very large wound channel right here. Looks like it's still right here. And there's our bullet. Like I said, at about 17, maybe it's 17 and a quarter, maybe even 17 and a half inches. I'll make that final determination back at the house. We'll get both of these bullets cut out, do our normal measurements, scoring, those sorts of things, and stick around. Let's take a look at how both of these performed. Well, I had some fun making that video in case you didn't notice, but let's go ahead and jump into the results. The 44 Colt, not really a viable self-defense round in today's standards, that's for sure. We'll talk more about those comparisons here in a little bit. But what we saw today, certainly I think, clarified that, and I note that that is actually the same reason why the U.S. Army in the 1870s moved away from the 44 Colt and adopted the much more powerful 45 Colt. but neither the 44 Colt or the 45 Colt or even the 44 Magnum, none of those can really compare to a centerfire rifle cartridge like the 3030 that we also tested a little bit today. Which is interesting because by today's standard, the 3030 is on the weak side of centerfire rifle cartridges, but in its day, when it was introduced in 1895, it was a very good cartridge, no doubt about that. In fact, it was considered the first successful centerfire rifle cartridge for 4 smokeless powders ever developed. Of course, in those days, 30 was used to designate the caliber, 30 caliber, 308 size bullet, and the other 30 in 3030 indicated the powder charge. So 4570, 3030, etc. Just a little bit of FYI, but of course, many of you probably already knew that. The 3030 round that I shot today was this one right here, a Winchester 150 grain PowerPoint bullet. This was from their 150-year commemorative box. I haven't shot hardly any rounds from this box. Of course, I kept the brass, nice nickel-plated brass, but that's what we were shooting today. Now, arguably, this is not the exact same thing that would have been loaded in the 1890s, but probably not too terribly different, other than the quality of the bullet, I guess, probably would have changed. But this is still a soft point, exposed lead type of bullet, right there. Right? So I'm not using some ultra-modern bullet in this for our test. I tried to keep it as close to historically accurate as possible. And I know it's not perfect, so bear with me on that. Now, I didn't put this over the chronograph. I probably could have done that, probably should have done that, but that round, according to Winchester, should be getting us about 2,400 feet per second. Out of that shorter barreled carbine lever action that I was shooting, probably not quite that fast, but that is remarkably fast compared to the other 44 Colt that we shot today. 44 Colt came in at just over 700 feet per second, so that 3030 is very likely at least 3 times as fast as the 44 Colt bullet. But the 44 Colt does have a much heavier bullet, a 230 grain bullet compared to the 150 grain bullet. But bear with me on this. We've got to talk this through to understand all this. Muzzle energy, or energy of the bullet, doesn't matter if that's at the muzzle or 200 yards downrange, that is a function of mass, 150 grains versus 230 grains, effectively multiplied by velocity squared. So velocity plays a much bigger role in generating energy compared to the bullet weight, or the mass of the bullet. So this 150 grain 3030 generated about 1,900 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle, and not too much less than that, only 7 yards away, where that ballistic gel block was placed. And by the way, I should note, I took a little bit of artistic license, a little bit of movie magic, you can call it. I did not shoot the gel blocks from a draw from the pistol's holster. I did that, as I said, just for a little bit of fun. And I did not shoot that gel block, by racking that lever and shouldering the gun and then firing the gel block. No, I shot the gel block in both instances from a very slow, steady position, kneeling like I normally do. So I place that bullet and it travels as straight as possible into that gel block, and I'm not shooting down into it. And also, if you didn't notice, I really sped up my draw with that pistol, and I noted that in the video, but I'm not that fast. I'm kind of slow, actually, and I thought it might be kind of fun. A little bit more of my artistic licensing being expressed right there. Let's take a look at the results, and starting with, let's say, the Bullseye target itself. This is our Bullseye target. Shot number 1 flew high. It was also quite a bit faster than the other rounds, but I think I might have pulled that myself. The sight picture might not have been exactly the same for these, and so this might be more on me. We could call it a flyer, and if that is, either I caused it or it was maybe also caused by being a little bit faster bullet, then this thing didn't really group too bad. Officially, I'm not going to throw out that 5th round, or the 1st round actually. The extreme spread is 3.75 inches. The accuracy was a score of 41 points out of 50. Muzzle velocity was 724 feet per second on average, and a consistency, that's the standard deviation of the muzzle velocities, of 10.6 feet per second. That's good. If we get down into the single digits for a rifle round, very happy with that. If we get down into the single digits with a pistol round, factory pistol, revolver round, I'm really happy with it. And this was just about there. So Black Hills did a really nice job on crafting this ammo. And I will draw your attention to the energy. Notice it's just 268 foot-pounds of energy. Remember, we were generating about 1,900 foot-pounds of energy from that 30-30 round. Terminally, the hard-cast bullet penetrated very deeply. Officially, measurements here at the house, 21 inches of penetration. But really, it produced no discernible temporary wound channel. Even the permanent wound channel was just this very, very small hole through the ballistic gelatin, the first block, and of course then into that second block. Compared to the 30-30, I have 3 individual screenshots of very impressive temporary wound channels, really dumping tremendous energy, tremendous amount of energy, more or less filling that entire first 16-inch gel block. The second one is where we start seeing that energy being really transferred into that gel block. It's starting to pick up off of that bench. And the third one again, showing that tremendous transfer of energy in that gel block. Compared to other self-defense handgun rounds like this 115 grain Corbon DPX bullets, one of the best bullets that we have tested terminally, we have a really nice penetration of just under 12 inches, so it's dumping all of its energy inside that first gel block. It retained 100% of its weight. This is for the Corbon bullet, compared to the 44 Colt, which retained 98% of its weight. And this Corbon 9mm bullet scored over 400 points, 437.5 points, compared to 310 points for the 44 Colt. Now, a score in the 300 range isn't too bad, but I like to see a good bullet, a very good bullet, tends to score in that 400 plus range. Drawing our attention then, by the way, back to the 30-30, looking at its terminal performance. I don't know if you caught that the last time I put this up on the screen. Penetration, just a little bit inside that second gel block, 17.25 inches. 92% retained weight, so it lost a little bit more of its weight, but a very nice expansion, very nice mushroom, over 200%. That is really good. We like to see over 200% expansion. And then it made it into the 400 club, 420 points for that 30-30. We can also compare this to the best 45 ACP bullet that I've ever tested, and that happens to be the 230 grain Federal HST. But then we have, again, a very nice penetration depth, 11 3/4 inches, just below that 12-inch point. It retained all of its weight, 100%, in this particular test, which was also a soft barrier test like we use today. Expansion of that bullet, 175%, and a total score of 475 points out of a possible 500 points. That is actually the best bullet I've ever tested in our PAC-T tests for self-defense. The 44 Colt is not what we would consider today to be a contender for your everyday carry. A lot of that is because of the capabilities of this particular round, this particular ammo, but also that this particular gun, this revolver, isn't very conducive for concealed carry. But of course, in its day, it served its purpose. And one of those purposes that we cannot forget is it really filled an important niche. So we had pistols that looked just like this that were really black powder pistols. And then along came smokeless powder, metallic cartridges, and so the need was to make revolvers that could use those newfangled metallic cartridges and this smokeless powder. So these type of revolvers were converted. Hence, this is a Navy conversion. There's also a Army conversion. Looks a little bit different than this. Tends not to have the brass on it. And that was done, that conversion was done, as I understand it, really by changing the cylinder. Now, if we put a 45 Colt or a 44 Magnum in something like this, things aren't going to go well because this is not actually that strong of a frame. Perfectly strong enough for a black powder and perfectly strong enough for the 44 Colt. But notice that this lacks a top strap in its frame. Contrast that to this revolver right here. This is a 44 Magnum Ruger Vaquero. Notice that this has a top strap to it. Greatly strengthens this revolver, and it can easily handle the 44 Magnum, even some very powerful 44 Magnum rounds like those produced by Buffalo Bore. Now, I am not a firearms historian, not a collector of firearms. I like to buy guns and shoot guns. I like it. It's kind of fun to do that sort of stuff. I like reloading. I like chasing precision, long-range shooting. Those of you who've been with me for a while on this channel probably know that I spend a lot of my time chasing precision, making those rifle rounds and those groups as small as possible. So I may have gotten a few things wrong historically, those sort of things. And if you have any additional information you'd like to provide about this whole thing that we've been talking about, 44 Colt, 45 Colt, 30-30, lever actions, Colt Navy conversions, whatever, any of that stuff, feel free to post that into the comments section below. Likewise, if you just have some questions about what we did, maybe some comments, ideas, post those in that same comment section below. Until next time, take care and thank you for watching.